just reread the movies. Can't reread the movies. I just... Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing a book tag. I haven't done one of these in quite a while. I saw this on Heather, her channel name is Bookables, I think. I saw this tag on her channel, but I think it was Emma Books that originally created it. It is called the History of My Bookshelf Challenge. I have the 26 questions up on my phone. I have thought about answers to some of them just to make this filling process go a little faster. So let's just go ahead and get started with the question. So the first question is the oldest book on your shelf. And I kind of had two answers for this. If we're going for the oldest book ever written on my shelf, I want to say that's Little Women. But I also have Emma, a copy of Emma. That was probably the oldest book I have printed. A copy of Emma I have was printed in the 1960s. I think that's probably the oldest printed book I have on here. As for publishing dates, I don't know if Little Women or Jane Austen is first. Let me see. Just Googling it. 1815 for Emma, which would mean any of the Jane Austen books are probably just as old. I think Little Women is more late 1800s. Little Women was published in 1868. The oldest books I have are the Jane Austen books. The next question is a book you read in 2013, and then it goes on consecutively through the years coming up to last year. Now, I didn't have a Goodreads until probably 2016, so I couldn't just look back on my Goodreads to figure this out. I tried looking through my Instagram and through like just trying to think about what was happening that year, like what grade I was in, and I have done my best to try and figure out a list, and I cannot guarantee I actually read these books in this year. I'm just trying to remember. In 2013 that was 8th grade, 9th grade, so I wrote The Hunger Games. I did read that in the 8th grade. I read that whole series. Obviously loved it. Just rewatched the movies this weekend. One of my favorite series of all time still. Then a book in 2014, I wrote City of Bones. I very vividly remember reading this my sophomore year of high school. We were on vacation. I brought it with me. I read the whole thing on vacation. I, got to the end about Clary and Jace, and I was like, absolutely not. What is going on? I Googled what happens, because at that point, I think the first 3 or 4 books were out. I Googled to make sure they were not brother and sister. Found out they weren't, and then continued on with the series because I was like, I'm not investing my time in this if this is what's going on. So for 2015, I wrote The Blood of Olympus, but after a quick Google search now, that came out in 2014, and I know for a fact I read it just when it came out, so I don't know a book in 2015. I probably read the first Magnus Chase in 2015. If the other series finished, then I'm just going to say the first Magnus Chase. I didn't have a Goodreads at this point. I can't keep track. I don't know. In 2016, this should be around when I had a Goodreads, so I can look back now. But in 2016, I wrote The Trials of Apollo. That's when that series started, and I read that first book around right when it came out. In 2017, that is my latter half of my first year of college, I wrote A Court of Thorns and Roses. I read that in my second semester there. I really, really loved it. And what was so fun about that book is wherever I went on campus and I was reading it, especially with the first one, I would be reading it and people were like, oh my god, I love that book, and you're gonna love the second one even more. I swear so many people said that to me when I was reading that book. So that was a lot of fun, and I did like the second one more because obviously the first one was a little misleading with, characters who are good, who are bad. Number 7, a book that I read in 2018, I wrote Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I read that my sophomore year of college. I distinctly remember for a few nights in a row, like not sleeping. Like I would stay up super late to read this book because it was just so addicting, and I loved it. I still love it. I've read it I think 1 or 2 times again since then, and I've loved it every time. A book you read in 2019. I have two options. I actually, in 2019 is when I read all of Jane Austen's books, or at least the majority of them. I think maybe the first one I read in 2018, but whatever. So that was a really big thing for me. I read all of her finished published novels. I don't think I ever read the unfinished one that I can't think of the name of right now, but I thought that was a really cool thing that I did. I loved all of them. I think Pride and Prejudice is still my favorite, but I like Sense and Sensibility as well. I also read A Study in Charlotte that year and read that whole series, consequently loved it. I read Stalking Jack the Ripper that year, read almost the whole series except for the one that wasn't out yet. That was great. There was a lot of good reading last year. Number 9, a book you have read more than once. I am a big rereader. I reread a lot of books. Literally, like last week, I reread New Moon, so there's that one. The Twilight series in general, I reread those a lot. I think that's probably the series I have reread the most. I think Breaking Dawn I have read like a good 8 or 9 times, but I'm not 100% sure because, again, back then I didn't have Goodreads, so I wasn't keeping track of it. But yeah, I've read that one a lot. I've reread Harry Potter a lot. I've reread Percy Jackson a lot. With every new book of Percy Jackson that came out with the Blood of Olympus or Heroes of Olympus series, I was rereading all of them leading up to that, like every year, so I've read those quite a few times. Carry On, I just said I've read a few times. I love to reread books, so that could be a long list. Number 10 is a book you waited about over a year to be published, and the answer for that for me was definitely the Heroes of Olympus series. So I read The Lost Hero around when it came out, and then had to wait for Son of Neptune, had to wait for Mark of Athena, had to wait for House of Hades, which we all remember the pain of that. That was the longest year ever. Just like ever. It was so hard. The Mark of Athena cliffhanger is something I will never ever forget. And then I had to wait a year for the next one. And I think that's the only series I've ever consistently read each as they came out and had to wait every year. Everything else I either fall behind or they're all already out, and so I just read them. Number 11, a book you read away from home or on vacation. Like I said earlier, I did read City of Bones on vacation, but another one that really stands out in my head is The Selection by Kiera Cass. I read that for the first time on vacation in Florida. I read the majority of it on the beach. That trip I also reread Breaking Dawn. Who would have thought? And then I distinctly remember I was on the beach, I finished The Selection, I was like, I thought this book was going to last me the whole trip. What do I do now? I think I probably had another book, but I didn't have The Elite, and I went on Amazon and I ordered The Elite and The One and had them sent to my house so they would be there waiting for me. Number 12, a book that you got from someplace special, anything that isn't a bookstore or an online retailer. There's a few I had. There's books I got as gifts, but I mean, those are still bought from bookstores. But this copy of Alice in Wonderland I won in a giveaway. I believe I won it along with this Pop and Go. Can't remember. And I also don't remember who I won it from, but I won it on Instagram. And this is the copy of Alice in Wonderland that I did read. I love it. It's pretty. It's a Barnes & Noble classic. And I just love it. It's purple. It's pretty. The illustrations on the inside are gorgeous as well. Number 13 is a book that has made you cry, and 100% the first book to come to my mind is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. There's a lot of books that make me cry, but that one is the one that really makes me sob. There's only a couple books that I really cry in, and that is definitely one of them. Number 14 is a book that you read in one sitting, and there aren't a lot of these, I don't think, because a lot of books are too long to read in one sitting, and I also don't have a lot of attention span to sit and read a book in one sitting. But there is one I specifically remember is Kingdom Keepers, the first one by Ridley Pearson. I don't know exactly if I read it in one sitting, but I read it in one day, and I remember that it was just a weekend day, and I really enjoyed the book, and I still love that series. I haven't finished it yet, but we don't need to talk about that. Number 15 is a book that was a gift. I chose Finding Fraser by Casey Dyer. That was a gift from my mom a couple Christmases ago. I read it last Christmas and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun little romance story. Number 16 is a book you read before owning it, like you rented it from the library or borrowed it from a friend. I chose Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I read that via audiobook from the library before I ever purchased a copy. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a classic that I liked or not. I didn't know what the story was about. I didn't know anything about it, so I rented the audiobook from the library and listened to that before I went and saw the movie. Obviously fell in love with it, and now I think I own 3 copies. Number 17, a book you lent to someone else. I don't lend my books out very often, not because I don't want to, but nobody asks me for them. Like, I don't really have any reading friends. The one I do, we do borrow a couple copies. Right now, the only one I can think of is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm not sure this counts, but I lent it to my mom. It's still in the house. It's just in the other room. She hasn't read it. I lent it to her a year ago. It's a little ridiculous. That is the only book I can think of that I have lent out right now. Number 18, a book that has been damaged, and a lot of these I've just been showing the pictures of the cover, but I'm gonna pull this one because it's, yeah, my Harry Potter series has been well loved, let's call it. Sorcerer's Stone is not too bad. Like, the cover's a little worn and like the spine's a little worn, but it's okay. Chamber Secrets, same thing. This one is actually my newest copy because our other copy, Chamber Secrets, completely fell apart and we had to replace it, and it's still pretty well worn. Prisoner of Azkaban is the most broken one. If you can see that, it's completely like not connected at the spine so much anymore, and like this, the spine is broken, so that one's fun. And then Goblet of Fire is also very worn on the spine and on the back, and I wouldn't be surprised if it just spontaneously fell apart at any time. The other 3 in my Harry Potter series are hardcovers, and they have endured the years a bit better, but these 4 are paperbacks, and they are a little rough, but I love them. These are all books that I have bought from years and years ago. I think they're all bought at the bookstore I used to work at when I was in high school, and that just makes me really happy that I still have them from there, and that they have been read many a times by me and my sister and my mom, so they are well loved, to say the least. Number 19 is a book that you got on discount or like on sale. And my answer to that is honestly probably all of them. I have worked at used bookstores almost every summer for the last 5 years, and this is the first summer I might not be doing that because of the crazy world, but so almost all of these books, unless they were brand new releases, are probably used copies. I have a couple from Barnes & Noble that were books I bought with a gift card, but like, I would say this whole shelf are used books. This one wasn't because it was a new release. All of these look like used books. The majority of my shelf is used books. Number 20, a book that you buddy read with someone or just like did as a book club or something. I don't have a lot of answers for this one either. I don't buddy read as much as I'd like to, but the ones that came to mind first for some reason were the Josh Sundquist books, all 3 of them actually. I read with my friend. This was a couple years ago now because he was doing a comedy show at our school, and so I figured I would catch up and read all of his books I had read, just not Fall before, but I hadn't read the other ones. So I read all of them, she read all of them, and then we went and got our books signed. So Number 21, a book that you associate with a song. I don't have a song specifically, I have more of a whole album. So the Blue Neighborhood album by Troye Sivan is what I listened to like on loop when I read Lady Midnight for the first time by Cassandra Clare. I read that book like within a weekend, and that was the only thing I was listening to, and like I had it on loop the whole time, and so just in my mind those two things are connected. Number 22, a book that you associate with food. For me, that is definitely To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. In my copy of the first book, she has a couple recipes in the back of the book, and I have made 2 of the cookie recipes from there so many times because they are delicious. I love her snickerdoodle recipe, and then she's got these cowboy cookies that I make, and they are my favorite. I love them. She should honestly just do a whole cookie recipe book because I love them. So number 23 is a prompt I did not know how to answer really. It is a book you got years ago that you probably wouldn't buy now. Honestly, like looking at my shelves, I can't think of any that I wouldn't buy now. The answer that I did write was The Savage Song by Victoria Schwab, which honestly I actually probably still would buy it because it's a very interesting premise. But like looking back, I didn't love the first one. I still want to finish the second one because it's just a duology, might as well finish it. This is a silly reason, but she tweeted quite a while ago about how much she doesn't like Amy March, and I was very personally offended, and I'm kind of holding a grudge against her, which makes no logical sense, but here we are. So number 24 is a book that you associate with a specific time in your life. Honestly, I feel like my whole life is told an era of books, but one that really stands out to me is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. When I read that book, it was a very difficult time in my life. There was a lot going on in like my friend life and my family life, in school, because school's always got a lot going on. That was definitely the book I just jumped into, and I like ignored everything that was going on and just focused on that, and I fell in love with Audrey Rose as a character. I connect with her so much. I see so much of myself in her, and I would like to think that I am able to embody some of her qualities. I think she's so smart and so strong and just an all-over incredible character. And then obviously I love Thomas. He is my book boyfriend. I love him so much. And then the premise of Stalking Jack the Ripper is just so interesting to me and so like intriguing, and I loved it so much. And I was able to meet the author last year, and she was so sweet, and I told her that I'm like, this book came into my life at such an important time, and it really meant a lot to me that I was able to escape into this story instead of having to face everything going on in my life at once. I was able to find some sort of comfort in this series, and she was such a sweetheart. She said this book was a big jumping off point for her too, because she had tried to get other books published and it just hadn't worked, and she finally decided to just write what she loved. Number 25 is a book that you used to like but you don't like anymore, and honestly I cannot think of one. There aren't any books that I have like changed my opinion on. There's books that I read and didn't like, and that's about it. I thought about this one for a while, but like I can't think of anything. To answer a question of just a book that I didn't like, it's not on my shelf anymore, but I don't actually, you know what, I don't think it was ever on my shelf. I borrowed it. But 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher, most hated book of all time. So number 26, the newest book on your shelf, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. It is my current read. It is my most recently bought book. I'm very excited for it. I'm like 150 pages in and lots is happening. So that is my bookshelf tag. There are a lot of books I have acquired throughout the years, a lot of books I've gotten rid of. It's changed a lot. I have continually run out of room and just had to make do with what I have, but I do really like my bookshelves, or at least I love the books on the shelves. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I feel like it was a little messy. I am trying to get better at setting up my camera and everything. Hope you enjoyed. Like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!